So, sitting in the Ace Cafe, how long have you had it?
Well, the story here, I would suggest, starts in 1938.
Yeah.
When chap had the bright idea of opening a cafe, motor showrooms, filling station, motor workshops, alongside a then relatively new piece of road called North Circular Road.
Yeah.
This North Circular Road was built in 1919.
Yeah.
And hot on the heels thereafter, this massive expansion of London and the suburbs, Metroland. And the speculative developer of this particular area, to include what is today north beyond the cafe, he had this slither of land between the North Circular Road and the River Brent. What on earth to do with it? And along came a chap called Vic Edinburgh with this then, I'd say, bright idea. A whole motoring centre, kind of like a motorway services, before they'd been invented. Tea and the coffee has just arrived.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome. I heated the cup up first, so it might be a bit hot to touch.
Oh, it'd be lovely. Thank you.
And so the cafe is part of a huge estate that opened in 1938.
Okay.
Missed them. And they flattened everything along here that has hitherto been the Ace, to include the cafe. Very quickly, during that period of wartime, temporary buildings went up to include a temporary cafe, and that in turn was entirely replaced post-war by the building we're sat in today.
Right.
And again, that was just in time for this new phenomenon called the teenager.
Yeah.
This massive baby boom who had work, a little bit of money, and they went out and spent their money on clothes, records, and on the cheapest form of transport that they could afford. And in this country, that was a motorbike.
Yeah.
Alongside a fast piece of road, there's no speed limits at that time on arterial roads. At 17, you could go and buy any motorbike you liked. You had to have an L plate displayed if you hadn't passed a test, but there was no requirement to pass a test to get a big bike. So kids were getting bikes, there was no training, no speed limits, and it was a recipe for carnage, which soon followed on these roads. But nonetheless, the die were cast, as it were, and the place immediately attracted youngsters. This then new place had neon lights, it had a jukebox playing from 56 onwards. Elvis changed, the soundtrack of that then new generation, and I would say the legends were born, to include with phrases such as ton-up boys, ton-up kids, meaning they wanted to get to 100 mile an hour, or calf racer, or calf racers. Invariably, through to this day, terms like these were coined largely by the press as terms of contempt with which to label the youngsters. I'm a calf racer. What have I got to have? Then I figure it up, clip-on handlebars, rear set pegs. And
so where were they getting the bikes from though? Were they sort of ex-military bikes?
Well, in the immediate post-war period, huge volumes of ex-military bikes being sold. Nonetheless, those factories churning out the bikes pretty much very quickly switched to civilian production.
Yeah.
And to illustrate the sort of volumes involved, BSA, for instance, during the war years, produced more motorcycles as part of that war effort than all the world's other motorcycle manufacturers added together.
Okay.
So you had a Harley, you had BMW, you had Triumph, you add them all up, BSA produced more bikes.
Yeah.
To keep those factories working, they were coming up with, in essence, pretty much the same bikes they had pre-war, tuned up a bit, and there's materials and...
So were they the fastest sort of bikes then, BSAs?
Well, they're all pretty much of a similar ilk, really, with the engineering that had been around for some while, single cylinder machines or twin cylinder. The kind of, I say the steps forward came about our first say with BSA, who realised that their 500 single and desire of kids wanting fast bikes, they marketed a bike called the BSA Gold Star Clubman, and the idea behind the Clubman Goldie was that you could ride to work on it, and at weekend, if you want to go racing, you take the light off, you've got a race bike. It's a Clubman's racing, and the BSA Gold Star to this day is, I'd venture to say, one of the icons of British motorcycle manufacturing. But I'd also venture to say the next.
But it's funny though as well, because you were saying about with the jukebox and the American culture and everything else. But even though there was this sort of, they were sort of assimilating this American culture. They were riding British bikes.
It's because of what they could get.
Yeah.
In America, that same generation, post-war baby boom, they're listening to pretty much the same music, but they're buying cars.
Yeah.
They didn't buy motorbikes.
Why?
Because they're cheaper in America.
Okay.
They're cheaper.
Right.
And got better incomes than over here. So the kids would go and buy the fastest thing they could afford. Over here, they couldn't afford a car, buy a motorbike.
Yeah.
America, buy a car. And that's captured, I'd say, for posterity in film, with the American story so well told, in my view, the film called American Graffiti, which, though produced in 1973, it's set in 1962. Whereas similarly over here, a film called The Leather Boys, which was produced, finished in 63, and
Such a mad name.
released in 64.
It would mean something different now.
Yes, well, it kind of did then as well,
Oh, did it?
as is revealed through the film. But nonetheless, it captures so well the early 60s here with motorbikes. And a lot of it's shot in a cafe and using the youngsters here as extras and whatnot. So it's cars in America, cars and rock and roll in America, bikes and rock and roll here.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened both sides of the Atlantic. I'll race you from here to wherever.
But so they were buying motorbikes and sort of souping them up and lightening them in ways and everything else so that they could go faster. But was there sort of much of a television culture, and were they seeing racing on the screen? Were they seeing motorbike racing on the
Most
screen?
people didn't have a telly.
So how were they seeing all these bikes that they wanted to?
Cinema. Well, it's transport. Pre-World War II, if you wanted to go to, I'll say, Brighton, Clacton, or Margate, you caught the train, or you got a bus, the Charabanc. That totally changes after World War II, where youngsters have got access to a vehicle and they can take themselves where they like.
Yeah.
That had never previously happened in the history of this country, in the history of this little island.
But they weren't assimilating, like now they might want to be like Rossi or something like that, but there wasn't much sort of...
Oh, no. Iron Man TT was the holy grail back then, as arguably, for many, it still is to this day.
Yeah.
But as speed and performance went up, circuits such as the TT became really questionable for some of the top riders.
Yeah.
And why risk your life when the money ain't that good at the end of it? But it seems to me that the appeal is simply of mobility, the ability to get around independent of anybody else, and that, I would suggest, is the driving imperative. And having got that independent mobility, you then want to seek out a peer group, and it is places like here, cafes, particularly with a jukebox playing the soundtrack.
But it's not just places like here, it is this one, isn't it?
In some ways to London, this is of the particulars of this site. this place, the Ace, are that it's on the North Circular Road.
Yeah.
It's not on a road going out of or into London. It's on a stretch of road where you're not actually leaving London.
Yeah.
Many other places that you may well have heard of, called the Busy Bee, but further north.
Okay.
That would have been on the A41s, long gone. Salt Box and the Oak, goodness, I'm trying to think now, I can't think of them now. But they all involved going out of London and back into London. Whereas here, with this hard stained car park, not a gravel car park, all the neon, purpose built, an adapted house, as it were, or pub. This screamed, come in, as a vista. I would suggest to any 14 to sort of 19-year-old who half an idea of it.
And then the press picked up on it, you were saying, because they...
Again, because it's so easy accessible by the press, based largely in London.
Yeah.
We've won a story about youngsters being...
Terror-based.
Killing themselves on roads. You just pop out on the tube network, up to Stonebridge Station, walk a few hundred yards and you're here. So it's easy to create a story around the place.
But these are the roads, so was there a certain sort of route that they... Because if you're saying the ton up, which is 100, I mean, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
You don't know the area. Well, the new urban motorway, which is about 100 yards south of where we're sat now, came in about 1990, thereabouts. Yeah. But prior to that, where we're looking out the windows now across the car park, what was in front of us up until the end of the 80s into the 90s was a massive embankment that went up higher than the railway bridges. Yeah. And it stretched for about half a mile along, so it was like a natural amphitheatre, an embankment, and watch the racing. But that embankment actually was just a mountain of rubbish. It was a rubbish dump, just a gigantic rubbish dump, most of which has been dug away to enable this new urban motorway. One little bit of it still does remain, which is somewhat obscured from where we're sat. Across the way there, it looks like a hill. Okay. With all green all over it. That's the last remnants of the rubbish dump. Okay. And the North Circular itself, coming from Hanger Lane to here, and then through these railway bridges, which of course would be a lovely exhaust note reverberating through them. It's almost like a tunnel. You'd pop out the other end of that, immediately on a crossroads at Harrow Road, straight over that. For about half a mile, you've got a gentle right-hander at kind of dogleg crossroads. What was once a pub called the Pantiles, today it's a McDonald's and IKEA there. And then you've got a really tight, nasty climb up to what's called the Iron Bridge, which is an S-bend. And immediately you exit that S-bend, the camber is all against you to this day. And back in the day, as you exited that S-bend, you'd be immediately up on a roundabout. That roundabout's now gone, it's an underpass there instead. But the party piece, so I'm told, is to come past here flat out, or from here itself, through the railway bridges to that roundabout. And then in the...
See, I'm smiling because it does, I can imagine myself doing it. It does sound exciting.
It's still tempting to stay, and if you go along the route I've just described to this day, you will see flowers on the pedestrian balustrades there, because there's still it still catches people. Yes, with very unpleasant consequences.
What year did you acquire?
Well, this cafe continued all the way through to '69. Okay. As did the garage and all the other bits and bobs that I described. And in '69, the chap who'd started it decided to sell up, and he sold up each, I'd say, business on its own plot. And the people who bought the cafe, within a fortnight, had stripped it out and turned it into a tyre fitting place. And that is because, coming back to motor vehicles again here, in 1959, with post-World War II rather, motorcycle sales went up and up in the UK.
Yeah.
And they reached their peak in 1959.
Okay.
And it's in 1959 that Triumph brought out a revolutionary bike called the Bonneville.
Yeah.
Nothing revolutionary about twin cylinders. It was a 650 twin cylinder. The name was redolent of America, Bonneville, and the speed trials and the land speed record a couple of years earlier by Johnny Allen in America. But what was revolutionary about that machine was that it had a carburettor on each barrel.
Yeah.
Where all other parallel twins up to that point had a single carburettor feeding those two barrels.
Yeah.
Now with a carburettor on each barrel, that meant the Bonneville was going to be first away. It'd be first away from the lights.
Yeah.
It'd beat the Goldie away from the lights. It was that quick. Top end, the Goldie would walk over, I'd suggest, over the Bonnie, but from the urban setting here, the Bonnie is keen.
Yeah.
Because it can get away quick.
Yeah.
And so that came out in 1959, but so did a particular car which changed everything.
What was that?
The Mini.
Okay.
And the Mini was cheaper than the Bonneville, cheaper than all those top bikes.
Okay.
So by the time you get to 1969, other manufacturers, of course, had brought out their similarly priced cars.
Yeah.
So bike sales since 1959 have only really ever gone down, the odd blip here and there.
Right.
Where car sales had only ever gone up.
Right.
So by 1969, cars are sitting nose to tail out here on the North Circular Road.
Yeah.
They need tyres.
Yeah.
It was a clear commercial decision. Aha, a new market. And so the place turned into the same tyre fitting depot. And I'd add that in that same period, you get the Ford Escort, you get the Ford Cortina, the Lotus Cortina, all that, the speed thing. And of course, with another generation buying into cars in this instance, and speed throughs, the term boy racer is then coined, and as again as a term of contempt for youngsters with their cars. Excuse me. So 69, I'm only a youngster, and to give you a context perhaps here, in 1966, which is a date certain of my age group will recall as the World Cup, which we won.
Okay.
Or it could almost be said that West Ham won. That's a bit contentious perhaps. But 66, Britain won the World Cup. England rather won the World Cup.
Is that the only time they ever have won it?
I believe so.
Okay. I don't know anything about it.
But 1966, I was 9 years old.
Okay.
And at school, everything was World Cup, football, basically. But also that year, it was the year that BMF held their first rally.
Yeah.
And at that time, as a 9-year-old, I lived near the place where that rally was held, a place called Wogan Abbey. And I was far more taken by the thousands of motorbikes, black leather jackets, the noise and the drama of all these bikes than whatever I was with football. So that was just an added incentive for me into two wheels.
Yeah.
So I never came here, didn't live anywhere near here.
Yeah.
In its halcyon days, but I did come past here on occasion with my dad, who had work in London. And hence, get a motorbike, and after the sort of...
What was the first bike you ever had?
Lionheart RD250.
Okay. Which is, everyone talks about that as a really exciting bike.
Well, the legislation had changed at the time I came to ride a motorbike.
Yeah.
So that as an L plate, I was limited to 250cc.
Yeah.
And in this instance, 250cc could still just about do 100 mile an hour.
Yeah.
And there's a whole sort of catalogue of how many bikes I've destroyed and tried to destroy myself as well and get fixed. And sell the bike, pile of scrap, get it fixed, got bits of metal all over the place. But with the fullness of time, absolutely enamoured with the whole sort of rock and roll, British motorbike, American cars, I would add to that as well. And to find a peer group sharing the same interest. And it's with that peer group, whether it's the Triumph Owners Club, whether it's American Auto Club, all sorts of clubs. I'm English, I'm into clubs of all sorts. And through that is then pull up out here to tyre depot and sit out there on the bikes. It's a shame they don't open it up again for us. We've got nowhere to go. We've got nowhere which all that's home.
Yeah.
We can go to events, we can go to things.
Yeah.
There's nowhere to think of as home. And there's this ever-onward march of, say, Americana. Some of it, maybe obviously, I absolutely love it. There was Cadillacs with big fins, Gretsch guitars and all that. But I'm not really in McDonald's and KFCs and eventually the interest in bikes, I've become a bit of an organiser, organising trips to Isle of Man, trips to the Bol d'Or race in France, trips to the Dutch TT, and on occasion there'd be huge numbers of people. It's all pre-internet and whatnot. And then one day at Triumph Owners Club round here, a fellow who used to come here says to me, "You love all this rocker, he's old rocker, you love all this old rocker rubbish." Yeah. And all the ace, yeah. This is at the tail end of '93, and he says to me, "Well, do you know when it's shut?" I looked at him blankly, no. I think, you don't know when it's shut, so taking the mickey out of me. Then he said it's shut in September '69. My initial response was, "So what?"
Yeah.
I kept saying, think about it. Well, he left me alone for a bit. But I did think about it. I started counting on my fingers and I realised that the following year, '94, it would be 25 years since it was shut. That's the light bulb moment. Reunion. I can organise that. Tell the club, yeah, what do you think? Yeah, how can I help? So that is how the reunion came about. And I hadn't thought about it for a while, and then realised, well, this is going to be huge, and it'll be the key to reopening it. Don't matter, but this will be the key to doing it. And so that's what we set out on as a path, as it were, back in tail end '93, beginning '94. So the first reunion was held here, courtesy of the then owners and the then occupiers. A lot of input from the council and the police, and barriers, and sure enough, thousands came along. And there all of a sudden was the evidence to show that this place ought to be reopened. It's quite a climb on since then.
Yeah.
But in the fullness of time, got planning permission, got the freehold, and having took on the freehold, you then inherit the tenant, the tyre company. But as they didn't operate on Sundays, got a burger van in sight on Sundays and opened up for bikes. I remember the year, 96 or 97. But no sooner having opened up for bikes on a Sunday with a burger van, and then of course the car clubs involved at the time, so like hot rod, American car stuff. I'll open up for him, so we eventually agreed to that on a Wednesday night, again, after the tyre company had shut. It's then in 2001 that eventually pulled the team together. It's Company London Limited, as it is to this day, with people who know about kitchens, know about raising funds, etc., etc. The builders came on site in January 2001 that enables us to open pretty much as you see it now.
Okay.
That later that year, in time for the reunion of 2001. So this year, 2024, is the 30th anniversary of the Ace Cup reunion.
So with the reunions, it was people that knew it at the time of its sort of heyday.
Well, it's a mix of the two. A mix of people who used to come here and knew it back in the day through generations.
So it's funny then, isn't it? Because even when it wasn't open, it was still sort of
still resonated.
Yeah, and so people were very aware of it, and that culture
I think
around
that's
it.
because it's not just because those people were still around,
Yeah.
who I venture to say gave it that bad reputation of the madness on the roads of it, but also because of the newspaper coverage, because of the films like The Leather Boys that you spoke earlier.
Which I'm going to have to watch.
And for instance, in January '61, a couple of quite coincidental things occurred on a Saturday. I can't remember the exact date, but it's January '61. You had a very popular programme on BBC, I think, called Dixon and Dock Green, which ran, I'd say, a bit like EastEnders or Coronation Street, is on every Saturday. And every Saturday, PC Dixon, of the mythical London police station called Dock Green, and PC Dixon's character was played by an actor called Jack Warner. And Jack Warner was an actor would be familiar with audiences all through World War II. He was in all sorts of films, and then had this lead role in this weekly programme called PC Dixon Got Green. And the episode broadcast on January whatever it was in 1961 was called The Burn Up. And as with each of the episodes, invariably there'd be sort of, I would suggest, a moral message. Girls don't run away from home, crime doesn't pay, all that sort of thing. But the evening I'm referring to, this particular Saturday, the episode was The Burn Up. And the naughty boy in that was played by a guy fantastic fellow who to this day is a larger than life character called Jess Conrad. And he played a youth. Mac then is a good-looking, very tall, good-looking matinee idol. I think Elvis almost, Britain's little arts. He plays the guy with a bike, girlfriend falls off the back and he's killed. So there's a coroner's thing, it's all about speed, etc. It's delivering this moral message that
speed doesn't pay.
Roads are dangerous places. Now, that's of the evening, and multi-millions across this island watched that programme. But quite coincidentally, that same Saturday in the morning, a wholly new magazine was published for the first time, a magazine called Today. And Today had a colour cover, a colour back page, and I think from recollection, a couple of colour pictures on the inside. And it's what I can only think to describe as a red top magazine. So whilst there have been periodicals, Fishing Monthly, Motorcycle magazine, all sorts of periodicals. This was the first mass market magazine, and it's since spawned all the other magazines we have in our newspapers to this day. And on the front page of that magazine, in its first issue, that same day, Dixon Got Green, had a picture of three youngsters sat in here with the splash headline, The Ton Up Creed: live fast, love hard, die young. And in the paper, or rather in that magazine, interviews with those youngsters. It's fun, innit? Etc. Now, that happened
It's funny, actually.
January. And I believe that subsequent to that, a chap came here to interview youngsters, because I think he saw that magazine, and I think he saw that programme. He certainly came here and interviewed youngsters, a young Australian fellow. He interviewed youngsters, got a whole series of photos done, and he sold his story to the Daily Mirror that appeared, I think it's February the 9th, 61. And the Daily Mirror's front page has a picture of a bike at night out here, the youngster, scarf streaming in the wind, with great big letters across the red page. It reads "Suicide Club." At the foot of the page, it reads something to the effect of it devours 130,000 a year.
Yeah.
It's not how many are killed, it's how many accidents.
Yeah.
Then over the next several pages, which is the first time a newspaper had ever done a single topic over several pages, there are photos and interviews with youngsters in here. And that journalist has sadly only recently died, and I regret to this day I never sought him out. His name is John Pilger, who went on to become very famous for his investigative work, and he revealed, for instance, Agent Orange use by America, denying it all through the Vietnam War. One of the all-time greats in investigative journalism, John Pilger. But it seems to me his first article in the Daily Mirror in February '61 is one of those articles which kind of sealed the notoriety of this place.
But that's funny, because you talk about the notoriety, and you said that the title was Live
Fast, Love Hard, Die Young.
So I can't sort of hear that as condemnatory, but was that meant to be condemnatory?
I don't know that it was. I think it's more of a comment as to how youngsters can think. Because
as a youngster hearing that sounds attractive, doesn't it?
It's how you think when you're 15, 20. But perhaps I'm being a little unfair here, because if I can recall correctly, that magazine Today, it had this reveal of one, I'd say, section of society, a section with which I identify enormously. To this day I ride bikes, not very well, I haven't fallen off for a while, but it also had another article in that same magazine about youngsters doing, I'm trying to think now, VSO, voluntary service overseas.
Yeah.
So there's sort of two sides to our society.
Yeah.
There's this yeehaw, live for today, and others, perhaps actually a little bit older, who realise they're in a position to be able to perhaps help others.
Yeah.
Which I'll venture again is part and parcel of the story here as well.
Yeah.
In as much that, coming back to that year 59, there's a club you might have heard of called the 59 Club, established in 1959 by the late Father John Oates as a youth club in Hackney. And when it opened, a desperate area, desperate poverty, and kids with absolutely nothing, but who wanted to hear rock and roll. So he opened up this club with Princess Margaret as its, I'm trying to think what they call it now, the patron.
Yeah.
And all Britain's rock and roll stars went there and supported that club.
Okay.
It's captured in film, Cafe News, etc., etc., etc. Started by a club. It's not a delivering gospel thing. It's kind of that VSO spirit, doing stuff. Now, in '59, all those 14-year-olds who went to listen to the music and the club, they all aspired to being ton-ups. They wanted motorbikes. Now, as the club got bigger and bigger, it was, if I get it correct, the vicar, Father John, was being drawn away from parish work and needed somebody else to come run the club. So the church, agreed, it seems, and the Father Bill Shergold was brought in to do the club bit. Now Father Bill rode a motorbike, so of course as soon as he turned up, and that's '62, on and on apparently, to invite the boys from the Ace.
Yeah.
And in May '62, indeed, he rides down here from Hackney, came in, handed out leaflets inviting what I've perhaps termed an Herbert's ear to come to his church for blessing the bikes and afterwards for tea and milk.
Blessing of the bikes?
Yep. Which was quite a revolutionary thing of its own. And of course, on that Saturday, I think it was a Saturday from memory, the church was packed. That again was recorded photographs and in the press. Bikes in the church, all these youngsters, and by and large, the national press lampooned lampooned him for inviting these youngsters and for reaching out to these youngsters. So having got a national platform through the press, of course, kids from all over the country then, a club for us, because they didn't join the BSA Owners Club, they didn't join the Wembley District Motorcycle Club, they identified with a peer group. So overnight there was a club for them.
But that's the funny thing that you said about blessing the bikes. That's almost, you might hear that and think that if you have some sort of remnants of Christianity or religion or something in your head, you might think that that gives you a free pass to ride fast or dangerously or something, that you're going to be okay. But it wasn't that. What was the reason behind blessing the bikes?
Try and keep people alive, I guess. It certainly wasn't, and to this day it isn't, because I am a member of the club.
Yeah.
It's not preaching gospels or anything like that at all.
It's like your golden ticket to safety.
Yes,
it's been blessed by the Reverend.
It's been described on occasion by vicars who ride motorbikes that there's nobody prays as hard as a motorcyclist when it goes wrong.
Yeah. That's mad, isn't it?
It is, perhaps, but I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And to this day, as I say, that the club's still there. And each year, as part of our reunion, we have the blessing of the bikes.
You still do that?
Yeah, we still do that. We'll ride from here.
Well, it's obviously worked.
It's so far. Thank you. Yes.
And may it always work for you.
Thank you. Yes, I hadn't quite thought of it in those terms. And you're spot on. It has seemed to work for me. I would have spent. My brother very kindly worked it out one day, because he brags that he's only had 2 crashes or something like that. But I spent 5 years in hospital when you add it all up.
Great. But that's over a fair few years.
Yes, a lot of my younger life is spent looking at hospital corridor ceilings and hospital ward ceilings.
But tell me now then, so now you have all sorts of sort of theme nights, don't you, here? So you have...
Well, we've only got X amount of space, as you can see.
You've got loads of space here for motorbikes as well.
So you have to manage that space, and most cars we can fit in is about 50. How
often do you have sort of bike nights? Is that just mainly in the summer?
Well, for sure. In essence, whether it's bike or car, the obvious is clearly with bikes, but no one wakes up to, it's raining, I must go for a nice ride today. You only ride in the rain if you have to. Sure, the weather is a big factor for us. But similarly with, I'll say, classic car night. And generally, the better the weather, the better the turnout. But youngsters, particularly youngsters with cars, if it's bad weather, that bad weather doesn't affect them so much. Whereas the guy who's got a classic car, particularly of my age group, he will have another car, which is his favourite. So his classic car will only come out on high days and holidays, and good weather, it will come out on snow.
It's funny, because earlier we were both talking about California and In-N-Out Burger, where all the youngsters go on these gorgeous bikes and flashy cars and everything to show off. Do you still have that here? Do they still come and do that?
The dynamic here is exactly the same.
Yeah.
It might play out in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
In as much that Friday night here is in UK is kind of party night with the lads and the boys. So Friday night here is a bike night.
Yeah.
And in good weather that can be. I can only liken it to a school playground, and if you haven't got any dinner ladies in the playground, it's like, oh my God, what are they doing now?
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of challenges around management here.
Yeah.
And it's similar with cars. youngsters, it's you think you're indestructible, simply.
Yeah, I'm going to put my coat on. It's quite cold. And how? Oh, I should do it when I'm here, shouldn't I? How has it sort of achieved worldwide fame? Because it has, hasn't it?
There's an element of...
And culturally, it's really, in the motorbike world, it is a really important name, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know, it's maybe something peculiarly, I say, British here, because we celebrate all sorts of strange things.
Yeah.
And endeavour to keep them going.
It's funny because I know, because I used to sing and I was signed with an American record label, and over there, when I used to go and perform in New York and things, and I'd be talking about all this old breakbeat, all this, 1970s sort of New York funk, and then they'd say to me over there, you British are really weird, you like all the old stuff. In America, we don't listen to that anymore, we're much more sort of contemporary.
Yeah. But ultimately, we are today, certainly in this country, the majority is an ever-aging demographic. Whereas 1959, 1960, was my age group now, the majority were youngsters.
Yeah.
So social dynamics are quite reversed. As you get older, you start being I think I'll call it a curtain twitcher. Oh, what are they doing? Oh, that's bad for you. Shouldn't be doing that. And that's reflected in, not just in all the legislation, but also in social mores.
Yeah.
Whereas youngsters, I can only think to say that actually that kid, you can keep saying, don't touch it's hot, don't touch it's hot, but at some point they've got to touch it to understand what that word hot means.
Yeah.
And it's only at that point that they then know.
Yeah.
And I can venture to say that this place represents arguably values that as a society as a whole we've forgotten how youngsters need to have their space, youth clubs and all that, you forget them today, disappeared. There's no opportunity for youngsters to engage with adults who share that interest. But this place and this space is where that can happen and does happen. So there's a thriving scene, or cult, thriving sort of culture around this that has its challenges. There's those that say electric vehicles, terrible, blah blah blah, why can't we have this? And petrol's great. I love the sound of the petrol engine. Screaming engine is lovely to a certain level. But again, I come to sort of food as well, with parallels there, that I like a bit of mustard now and again.
Yeah.
But don't in the whole jar. And so with noisy pipes, there's a certain level that is, wow, that sounds really good, but that's too much. It's like, no thank you. And it's helping people find that.
Yeah. It's funny actually talking about that. I was thinking the other day when I parked in a car park, and as I went off, I set off car alarms with the noise of my exhaust. And I know it's really bad, but I always think, I really love it. Tell me about here. Do you have people from all over the world coming to? So I know you say you get Americans here who.
From all corners of the world, all corners.
And make sure that it's still recording as well. Yeah.
On occasion, there's been visits here on 2 wheels or 4 wheels from, say, America, from Australia, and one occasion in particular, a chap who'd ridden, obviously going back a year or two, had ridden across Russia And the chap turned up on a bike from Japan, having ridden from Japan. And his map out showed us the route. So he wasn't far behind the first bloke.
What was he riding?
I think it's a Suzuki.
That's what a Japanese
Or similarly, the guy, Nasser Latif, got the name correct. The fellow rides in and think, this looks rather strange, the attire, on a very old motorbike. And as the motorbike got sideways, as it rolled in, I could see that it was an old BSA, like a World War II dispatch rider's bike. And it rolled in, and you see a number plate, and it's a really strange number plate. Off comes the crash on. Anyway, ridden from Pakistan.
Blimey.
And there's a marvellous tale to tell about the bike he'd ridden on, ridden here on, and of the other bikes at home.
Yeah.
Quite remarkable.
What about your bikes?
My
How many
bikes,
do you have?
I have that one that's in the car park, which I ride courtesy of Triumph. It's a fantastic street trip.
Yeah.
Now, the backstory here is that I had basically had 2 cars and 14 motorbikes.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've had loads of motorbikes. Over the years, I've bought this kept all the British ones.
Yeah.
And over those years, it's, if you don't ride them, they deteriorate, rot away, seize up.
It's hard work keeping a bike on the road. I've got 3, but even that, it's...
And the yin-yang process is, I'd love one of those. And then it's, why have I got them? I don't ride them, that's the one I ride.
Yeah.
And in my case, these old bikes, kickstart, I've got legs that are stuffed with rusty steel, harder and harder. And just before COVID, I don't know, yin prevailed, I guess, and decided to sell the lot.
Did you?
All stuck in auction and went in. It was like a therapy.
Yeah.
And now I just rely on that right thumb of mine to press a button. It's so wonderful.
But you sold everything?
I sold all the motorbikes except one.
Yeah. Which one was that?
And sold 1967 SS Chevelle, big block Chevelle, since 1980 something or other. A 32 free window hot rod. I've had so many ludicrous things. I live in London.
Yeah.
It's a motorbike with freeze. But the bike I kept is a Royal Enfield Constellation.
Okay.
Now, the Royal Enfield Constellation came out in 1958. It's 700cc, parallel twin, that apparently could do 115 mile an hour.
Was that a really big bike for them?
It was a super bike. It was arguably the first super bike.
Yeah.
And certainly bigger than the Bonnie of a year later, but the Bonnie had those 2 carburetors. It was much quicker. Now, this particular Constellation is rotten as a pear. I couldn't even describe it as a barn find.
Yeah.
Not that good. However, it is the bike, the very bike that is on the front page of the Daily Mirror in 1961.
Oh, is it?
That actual bike.
So how did you get that?
My goodness. It's a wonderful story and involves a very dear late friend of mine called Roger Glover. And Roger is of the generation that would have come in, quite a bit older than me. And totally into his bikes. And having embarked on this notion, Ace reunion, get the cafe open, Roger was there from the moment go to help any which way he could. And Roger would turn up here from Southend on all sorts of rotting I'd say 30-year-old Japanese motorbikes that he'd probably pay 30 quid for. And on occasion Roger wouldn't turn up because it's blown up, it's whatever, something's gone wrong, and he would then tell me he's going to sort it out. Blah, blah, blah. He never did, but he'd buy another one. And one day, is the burger van day as we call it, a chap came in, as people did, to say to me, oh, he used to come here back years ago, and I've got a lot of photographs. And in this particular instance, chap came in and said, oh, he used to come here, and etc., etc. And then showed me a picture, and it's the bloke, this Daily Mirror. It says that, yeah, it's on your bike. And he said, no, you still got the bike. He said, nah, I sold it years ago. Anyhow, back to Roger. I happened to mention this to Roger about the bloke coming in with his bike, and he said to me, well, I've got it. I've turned to him and said, you never told me that. I would have told him that. You never told me.
Yeah.
So, etc., etc. I said, well, don't ever sell it unless you give me first dibs.
Yeah.
And I'd repeat that to him, I'd say, every 6 months.
Yeah.
And as the years went by, sadly, Roger passed away. And then I had this phone call from his widow. Telling me, would I be interested in a bike? And I was like, yeah, of course I would. And I went to icy cold and I thought, oh my goodness, I have no idea what these things are worth, and this is, this. Anyhow, in the fullness, through another widow knew chap who, another peer of Rogers, who knew his bikes and whatnot, and so we came to a figure and which I was more than happy with, and I have that bike.
It's funny though, because I came to bikes from horses, and like you...
I can't say from, I'd say they're in parallel.
Okay, with me it was first. But like you, I taught myself to ride by just throwing my anorak over horse's back and lobbing myself on and shooting off and then coming off in the field and stuff. But I used to be really wild with horses, and it's funny because you just, playing around with horses and getting on anything as well, and going on to ride. But do you ride horses now? No,